Today's guest is someone who has experienced football from almost every possible angle. Shaylee Foord and I first shared the field as teammates with the Edmonton Storm. We later worked together at Free Play for Kids alongside last week's guest, helping young people find confidence, community, and opportunity through sport. And this August, we'll become teammates once again when we represent Team Alberta at the Women's National Championship. She has been a player, a coach, an official, a video coordinator, and an equipment manager. There are very few people who have been willing to learn the game from as many different seats as she has. She's also a good friend of mine, someone who has never been afraid to ask the hard questions and who has one of the strongest desires to learn that I have ever witnessed. She doesn't just want to be around football, she wants to understand it, challenge it, and discover where she can make it better. Today, we're talking about all the hats she's worn, the lessons that come from seeing the game through so many different lenses, and what keeps someone choosing football even when the path through it is anything but straightforward. Shaylee Foord, welcome to Blitz and Bloom.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've been losing sleep about this all week because we just talked about it briefly, but I feel like we could talk for like hours and hours and hours. Um, yeah, just really excited to be here. I loved your last season interviewing all the pros, but it has like brought a special joy and warmth to my heart to hear the interviews this season and just like talking to our friends and the people we know who are making an impact and just like the reminders of who is out there doing what and why we do it. It's just been really beautiful, and I'm excited.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words. I am also so excited. I think like every week that goes by, there's just an ongoing list in my head of people that I want to bring on here and expose the world to, just to really give people the opportunity to see who the people are behind the scenes. Like, yes, we have the pros. And I think the big thing with that is giving them the opportunity to be seen as humans because so often they're looked at as just athletes. And then with people like you and F and Emily and everyone else that'll be on this season, we're kind of just the behind the scenes people a little bit more. We're not on that professional platform as an athlete where you're really put up and advertised and promoted. But I think there's so many amazing stories that happen behind the scenes, we can say. So before you experienced football through all these different roles, you first found the game as a player. Take me back to that beginning. How did football enter your life? What made you brave enough to step onto the field? And what did you find that made you want to stay?
Okay, wild to even think back on. Um, it's 2019. I have just left kind of within the last year, a career in nonprofit work that I was kind of burnt out of. I was going back to my roots and just working in a restaurant for a minute. I always like turn back to hospitality when I need to rethink. And I was working in this kitchen that had just opened, and there was a line cook there, Erica Crumpets, shout out Erica, who was just like yapping one day and was like, "Oh, I play for this women's tackle football team." And I had, like, grown up in rural Saskatchewan. Obviously, like, football was a part of my life. My high school hadn't had a team, had, like, just relaunched their team after 60 years when I was in high school. So it hadn't been, like, super present in my life, kind of a passing interest. But I was, like, on this project of trying to just, like, say yes to more things and take more risks and try different things. And I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool. I'll come out." Thinking that if, like, beer league tackle football is a thing, that's what I was signing up for. I don't know what I thought that would look like. But she was like, "Oh, okay, come out to this practice at Foot Field." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, let's do it." Get to the day of practice, and now I'm like, "Oh my god, I said yes to this, but also I kinda wanna pee my pants." I'm so nervous. And so I just sat in the car in the parking lot for probably a 15 solid minutes, trying to give myself a pep talk to just walk in the doors. And then I don't know what it was about the environment, the staff, the teammates, the competition. Just immediately, I knew that I wanted to stay and I wanted to come back. We had a coach at the time, Steph Lou, who I remember just being so unbelievably welcoming to me. And I was like, okay, this is a space. And it was just a different side of women's sports than I'd seen before. You know, I had played water polo, I had played softball, dabbled in various sports growing up, but kind of never found anything that impacted me the way football does. And part of what actually I think keeps me coming back to it all the time, I was just thinking about this in the gym this morning, is that I'm not very naturally gifted at it. Um, and I really felt like it kicked my ass that first day and has kind of been kicking my ass mentally and physically every day since. And it's just the feeling you get when you get a little bit better at something or don't get knocked on your ass after you did 5 times in a row. There's something very addictive about it. Shortly after that first practice, I tore a hip flexor, mostly just because I was deconditioned, I think. I just was not ready to be sprinting that much. And I think if it was any other sport, I would have just not returned. But football for me, there's so many layers of it, and there's so many different ways to get better at it, whether it's lifting weights, whether it's working on your individual skills, whether it's being in the playbook, whether it's watching film. So there's a lot that kind of drives that engagement even when you can't participate fully. And then it's just been, yeah, the same thing every day since.
When you first started playing that first couple months, what did you believe your place in football could be?
You know, I was just happy to be out there. When I think back on it, even I look at old photos, I was a tiny person. I look at me back then and was like, "Ooh, maybe you shouldn't have been out there. You could have got all your bones broke." Um, I was and I will say, like, probably not super athletic at the time. It had been a couple years since I had played any sports, and I was just like, "If I can get out there and not make an idiot of myself, I'm gonna be happy." I started at receiver, I loved it immediately, you know, just hoping that you can be even just a little bit more impactful week to week. I never ever could have predicted that it would take over my whole entire life.
That whole idea of where you might fit into football ended up expanding in a lot of directions. Can you give us the quick timeline of your journey from starting as a player through the different roles that you've taken on since?
I'm gonna get the dates jacked up just because I don't have any, like, mind for it. Um, but we played that 2019 season, loved it. 2020 was the first attempt at a Team Alberta tryout. I was gonna try out, there was gonna be that tournament in 2020. I was determined to try out. I remember going through those tryouts and being the most frustrated I've ever been in my life. They switched my position mid-camp, and I just remember being kinda so flooded with information, and it was my first time seeing a playbook that was not the one I played in season. I remember crying a lot at that camp, but again, finding it so gratifying to find those little flashes. And then, you know, made it through the first round of selections. Obviously, that got axed. We didn't play that season or I think the next. And then you were the one who kind of set me off on a different path from then. And I've been reflecting on that so much this week. And I just really want to make sure whatever you have planned for this hour, I want to make sure that we take some time and talk about that because something that I think is a huge difference maker in the lives of women in sport and women working in sport is not necessarily access or a seat at the table or an open door, but it's sponsorship. It's somebody walking into a room and saying your name to the people around it. And I think that there are less pathways for that for women, especially in male dominated sports like football. There's not a lot of people who will walk into a room and say your name when an opportunity comes up. And you did that for me, like really, really early in us knowing each other. And it radically changed my life. And it was a time in my life where I was trying to figure out who I was in the world and in the sport. And you saw an opportunity where you were hiring a staff at Free Play, and you were hiring a staff of flag football coaches. And I felt at the time that I didn't know anything. And you were like, "Hey, I want you to apply for this job." And I was like, "I absolutely am not qualified to do that job." And I remember you like talking to me and being like, "No, I'm picking you because I think you have these qualities, and it's not necessarily about what you know about football, but it's about who you are and how you show up in the world and what you can contribute to this as a social organization. And I just kind of have, like, carried that feeling throughout the rest of my career and have kinda tried to pass it along as much as I could because a vote of confidence from somebody who, like, had the power to make a difference changed everything. I'm crying a little.
Same.
So, we did some, like, weird stuff over there. We started a sports program in the middle of a pandemic that was also a social program. I was running elementary school gym classes in my living room for a while. We were trying to figure out how to teach kids flag football when they were confined to 6 by 6 boxes of tape on the floor and they weren't allowed to share any equipment. Me and you and FF and Taddy and Christian and Autumn and Nazi and Tanner and Wyatt for a minute were all finding a way to make an impact on kids' lives in ways that you could feel every day. It just really woke me up to the power of sport and the power of play and the power of having people believe in you and how we could pass that on every day. Um, and then you got your job with the Lions. I kind of slid into your role at Free Play. That was the first year of the U18 girls national tournament. So I was the equipment manager for Team Alberta. Again, just somewhere in there, I was a little bit involved with CDMFA. You and Alicia spoke about it a little bit, just about how for women in this sport, you're kind of always trying to like do all of these things at the same time. And so it's always we'll get into it more, but I always feel like I've kind of got my hands in too many things at once to be really delving into one of them. So it was a lot of just like saying yes to stuff and seeing what would stick. Sometime in there, we weren't playing football, but I was like, I need to be better by the time I get back. So let's try officiating. I think you're the one who suggested that to me too, actually. Made it through a couple of seasons with the EFOA. Again, can't speak highly enough about what that experience was like or kind of how helpful that was. But I just made it my mission to see every side of the game I possibly could see. I was just trying to do as many things as I could and meet as many people as I could. And I've always been really fascinated about the ways that all of these people's jobs fit together. And one of my favorite things about football is you've got like hundreds of eyes looking at the same thing and seeing all completely different things. And all of those people are needed to make it roll smoothly. So, did 2 years with Team Alberta as their equipment manager, loved it. Again, just seeing a different side and seeing the potential that exists to grow the sport for girls and for women especially was magical. So then 2023, I applied for the women in football program through the CFL. I kind of checked all the boxes I could when it was like your area of interest. The only one I didn't check was football operations. Okay. So I get an interview with Edmonton Elks. We like talk. G-Roy asked me a lot of stuff about my experience with Team Alberta. That first year I had GM'd as well. And then we get off the call and they call me back and they're like, hey, we want to bring you in for training camp as an operations assistant. And it was like, ooh. However, I'm not an idiot. I'm not gonna miss an opportunity at CFL training camp, right? Like, fine. So I say yes to it. I'm on kind of a secret mission internally. I'd also just attended you had Emily Todd on. I attended her and Taylor McIntyre's first iteration of the Women in Football Conference. John Park, who coaches for Football Ontario, had said something in one of those sessions that stuck with me. And he was like, if you really want to keep yourself a job forever, learn video because it just becomes more and more relevant and kind of less and less people want to or know how to do it. So if you just want to keep yourself relevant in the sport and always have a place to go, learn video. So I was like, okay, here's my secret mission. I'm going to go in as an ops assistant and I'm gonna just absorb as much as I can, and I'm gonna try and wiggle my way into the video department. One thing led to another, and by the end of camp, I was offered a full-time position for the season as an operations assistant, and I filmed practice and games. Season goes by, season ends. Our head coach and GM at the time, Chris Jones, is kinda doing his end of the season wrap up, and I remember thinking we were gonna have a sit-down conversation about how the season had gone, and there was a lot of moving parts, he had a lot going on, and I just remember instead we ran into each other in the hallway, and I had kind of made up my mind. Again, ops was something that I loved learning about insofar as I love knowing how it fits with all the other stuff. I developed some skills that I didn't know that I had, but at the end of the day, I was like, "Okay, this is not quite close enough to the football as I want to be." I feel a little bit like it's a lot of administrative work. It feels a little bit like team mommy in some ways. Um, and I was like, "You know what? I loved the opportunity. I loved being here for the season, but that one's probably not for me." And so I run into him in the hallway and he's like, "Hey, operations assistant next year." And it was like, "Coach, I don't think that's for me." And I just remember him saying, "Well, it's that or nothing. I can't just make up a job." And I was like, "Okay, that's it." And I kinda mentally closed the book. Couple days later, contract slides across my desk. I was expecting to be seasonal again, but it's a year-long contract as a video assistant. Super, super excited. Spend the off season kind of learning as much as I can and doing what I can in the off season. Our video coordinator wasn't living in town, so I was kind of the one in the office, again, just trying to catch up as much as I could. And then right before training camp of my second season, I had gone to a film conference that's now in its third year, put on by Chad Osland, who is my dear friend and mentor. And it's a conference to recognize the contributions of video departments in NFL, NCAA, CFL, high school video departments, whatever. So I'd attended this. I came back kind of all full of juice. We're like a couple weeks out from training camp, and our video coordinator announces that he will not be returning for camp. And they're like, "Okay, you're up." And I remember thinking I might simply pass out or pass away. But then there was no time for that. You just, like, you rally, you figure it out. We, thank God, brought Chad in for the month to help me get through training camp and to kind of teach me everything I needed to know. And then that was that. So I spent 2 years as a video coordinator for the Edmonton Elks. Loved absolutely every second of it. Uh, Whole combination of reasons, largely personal. I had gone through an injury last year that kind of was tougher on me than I thought. I had some family things going on. And then part of it was I got so much energy, especially last year, from spending time with the players and the coaching staff and just seeing how they operated and seeing what trajectory they were on, that I really started thinking about I wanted the opportunity to be an athlete again. And the schedule just didn't really allow it. The women's season starts during training camp, and that's when most of it happens. So it had been a lot of years since I had got to play more than one game in a row. Injury really made me kind of rethink my priorities and just what kind of time I had left as an athlete. And so I decided after we hosted the CFL Combine this year that I would kind of wrap up my time with the Elks for the time being and spent the season playing for the Arctic Pride. Had a great season, got absolutely mopped up in the championship by the Saskatoon Valkyries. Rough one. Um, but like you said earlier, I'm so, so excited. Kind of the highlight of my year and maybe all of football for me right now is we get to be teammates again on Team Alberta in a month. I'm screaming. That was long-winded, brother.
I remember being asked a very similar question once, and I was waiting for them to ask details, like, "What do you wanna know?" And they're like, "Well, just tell us everything." And I was like, "You know it's gonna be long, right? This isn't it's not just, oh, I played in high school, played pro, and now I'm here." There's 10 different directions the story goes, and there's all these timelines, and there's all these little details that actually, like, matter, and you
Mhm.
can't leave certain ones out because then that doesn't make sense, so I get it. Actually, you didn't mention one thing, though. You also coached this year with the West Edmonton Raiders.
Oh my god. How could I forget? So this is actually, again, kind of tough to keep track on because I've been floating around the West Edmonton Raiders for a long time. But again, just the nature of the job, the nature of when the women's season happens, training camp. This was the first year that I felt like I got to spend really solid time with them. And actually, except for the days when they fell on the same day, I got to attend most of their game days. And that is a program, let me tell you, they're really onto something, and the athletes that are being produced by the West Edmonton Raiders, in 5 years, the women's league is gonna look very, very different, and just even a few years that the CDMFA girls program has been going on, it's just become so much more competitive, and the athleticism of these girls and how hard they work is mind-blowing to me. They're just incredible, and whenever I kind of need strength or motivation, I just think about how hard the West Edmonton Raiders work and how tough they are. I'm talking big hits, fast play. Our quarterback has an arm. She also ran for like 1,000 yards last year. The girls are balling out.
I think the Raiders is so close to me because that's where I started my girls football journey was coaching, obviously getting the program up and running across the board, but coaching with that team. And we had 9 athletes the first year
Yeah.
playing 6-a-side football and we won everything. And it just to hear that the grit and determination has carried on so many years down the road and that's very much still there and was what everything was built off of makes me super happy.
And then, just to tie it all back, some of those OG West Edmonton Raiders played with the Arctic Pride this year, and, like, full circle.
When Autumn told me she was playing,
Mm,
I almost perished. I didn't even know how to I was so happy and so excited, but again, like you said, it's so full circle and it's almost overwhelming when those things happen because it's just all the pieces are falling into place and things that you dreamt of happening, which was that like those full circle moments of people coming back and the sport growing because of it. Until they actually happen, it doesn't actually seem that possible, but then it happens and
mhm.
you're just mind blown.
It's so beautiful.
Was there a role that came most naturally to you across the board of everything that you've dipped your paws into?
Not, truthfully. If anything, honestly, like, the video stuff, which is kind of bizarre because I've never thought of myself as a particularly techie person, but that role, especially in the CFL, is relatively independent. It's a lot of problem solving and just, like, being adaptable and just, attention to detail, and that was something that I don't know if it came naturally, but I think I have, like, a natural curiosity and a natural ability to just try stuff, and I think it's a job that's kind of conducive to, "Oh, you see a problem, okay, try this, this, and this," and just, like, see what sticks. So if anything, it's that. But all of it has kind of, you touched on it. The part that comes naturally is, like, just a desire to learn for me, is, like, so much of it is just process. And I always kind of thought I would thrive, and I don't know if this exists. It hasn't existed for me yet, but I've maybe seen it for other people, is, like, I always thought I would thrive in a situation where I found someone as a mentor who's just like, "Okay, here's everything I know. Let me transfer it into your brain, and then you can work with it," right? But it's been a lot of kind of trying to learn things that people aren't necessarily explicitly teaching to you. So I've a lot of the spaces that I've found myself in, I kind of approach as an anthropologist. I just feel like I'm always listening and learning, and I have so many notebooks full from my time with the Elks because 'cause I'm just writing stuff down that I see and hear from everybody, and they all find their way to, if anything, like, it's all kind of helped build the pyramid. I find the hours I spend with film help me as an athlete in ways that I didn't expect, and then I find myself when I'm coaching repeating things that I've heard other coaches say or heard my coaches say. So I think they all have worked together.
Has seeing the game from so many different roles ever made it harder to accept how narrowly some people understand it?
Yes. Oh my gosh. And, like, I think it's also helped me to be a little bit of a bridge sometimes, where even on my own team with my coaches, and especially actually officiating is kind of the biggest one and probably the most misunderstood one, right? And I will say, I think just, like, having had that experience of being an official and learning it, you're in some ways less forgiving when you see it done badly. But also, I'm gonna take this moment to, like, get on my soapbox for a second. 'Cause this is the one that, like, really baffles me, and it's people within football, but also a lot of just people in the stands or on Facebook or whatever. Love, love, love to talk about the quality of officiating in all sports, at all levels, whatever. But here's my soapbox moment. If you are abusive to officials who are learning, they will not come back and get better.
Shocking.
So I got, like,
Groundbreaking thought process.
so there's a lot of people who complain about the quality of officiating at the highest level, but, like, if you stop and think about that for 5 seconds, you can point to a pathway where new and young or inexperienced officials start doing it, make some mistakes, of course. Everyone is gonna make mistakes. But then you get, like, parents or coaches or whoever else hurling abuse at officials in your child's peewee football game. Like, did I miss that call? Probably. You know who else didn't do very well this game? Your 12-year-old, okay? And it's because he's not very experienced. Neither am I. You know how I'm gonna get the experience? Reps, okay? And so I just, like, see this pathway. There's this organization called Officially Human that crunched some numbers on it and, like, did some surveys and just found out about retention rates of officials, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's like officials across sports, across levels are dropping out usually around their 2nd year, and a lot of reasons for that, but a big one is how they're treated. And so then what ends up happening is you're dealing with this official shortage. Now, people who are just resilient enough to stick it out for more than 2 years are getting kind of, like, pushed up maybe faster than they should be, or maybe faster than they're ready to be. But you have to be because you don't have a consistent pool of people, learning and improving. And so then are being put in situations where they're either not ready or not supported maybe. Thankfully in Edmonton, I have nothing but wonderful things to say about the EFOA. They're incredible about development. They're incredibly supportive. They're doing a really, really good job at trying to bridge that gap. But it's such an easy thing to kind of, when you actually start to think about it, to be like, okay, this is why that problem exists. And like, maybe it's true that you, Todd, would have done a better job there, but then why don't you do it? The reason all of these people are out here and jacking it up is because you're not out here. You would rather be in the stands drinking a beer. And I just think unless you've seen and experienced it, it's really easy to make a lot of noise. And I kind of feel the same. Edmonton has been an easy case to talk about for a few years, about everyone has an opinion on what's been going wrong, what is working, what isn't. And I will tell you, it is not one person or one thing. It is a many, many, many headed monster. And it's so easy for me to have an opinion on what the ticketing team is doing or what the quarterback situation is or was or whatever else. But at the end of the day, you can control what you can control. I just think it takes a lot of different people focusing on a lot of different things to make it happen, and it's given me a lot of value to find out the ways that the various jobs and roles connect to one another.
I think it's very clear that the variety you've had in your football career has paid off by giving you a perspective that very few people have. But gaining that perspective required you to keep asking questions. And I know you've never been afraid to ask the hard ones. Were there environments where your curiosity has been welcomed and others where it's been treated almost a little bit as a threat?
Ooh, I've been reflecting on this a lot this week too, and now that I'm, like, a few months out of my 3 seasons with the CFL, I keep on kind of thinking about how I approached that space and what I would do differently if I got to do it again, and I think, talking to you and talking to a lot of people who would know us, like you said, not a lot of people would say I'm soft spoken or quiet or hold my tongue. But I don't know if it was intimidation or insecurity or just not feeling I don't know. I will say for a lot of those 3 years, I kind of subdued myself. I didn't ask too many questions out loud, definitely not too many controversial ones for sure. I kind of tried to, like, be a good soldier and do my job and just be about the work. And I think if I get the opportunity to get back in the league, I will probably show up with a little bit more confidence to be myself, which sometimes means asking more difficult questions. And I think instead, I spent a lot of time observing. The one thing I will say is I have always felt I've been really thankful. I've always felt, like, immensely supported by the coaches and my bosses at work. And I was thinking about this too, is I walked into those spaces a little bit timidly sometimes, and I was thinking of, like, a couple different situations where it's been really valuable to me to have men as mentors in those spaces because they are not operating out of those same insecurities. And, like, a lot of that is, like, experience as you've been at this 30 years, but some of it is just how they carry themselves into situations. One example I can think of is I had, like, an interaction with a player about some damaged equipment one time. I was, again, maybe a little bit less assertive than I could have been, or you don't know how you're coming off. And I asked him something, and he kind of gave me this explanation that I again then had to go deliver to our GM, Ed Hervey, who I don't know if you've met him. I have so much love and respect and gratitude for Ed, but he's, like, an incredibly intense person. And, like, I'm always, like, a little bit nervous when I have to tell him something. And so we're on a trip, I have to talk to him about this broken equipment. I repeat to him what this athlete has said to me, and he looks at me point blank and he says, "Did you ask him not to insult your intelligence?" And I just, like, I laughed so hard because 1, no, I didn't. 2, I don't know if that would be received the same way if I said it. But that was kind of like I had interactions with him like that, and then a couple really notable ones with Chris Jones, where I worry a lot about, like, whether people think I'm a bitch. And it was, like, really affirming that the men that I reported to didn't care if people thought I was a bitch. And that is something that I will definitely carry on to whatever my next role is. Um, just operate with a little bit more audacity, actually.
You explained your experience and how you showed up and how it felt is very much the same, exactly the same. Like, if I was to put mine in words, it's almost verbatim. It also makes me think of when I was talking to Alicia, it was the same thing, but she was a week in or something. She was like, "Am I showing up as my best self? Or am I being timid? What am I doing?" And she like, flipped that switch and was like, "No, I'm going to make the most out of that."
And I wish I had, like, done that earlier. And I think I kind of, I tried too early to blend in or to, like, not stand out or to not draw attention to myself, and I kind of think that things would have felt a little bit different for me if I had just showed up as my full self from day 1 and let everybody adapt or not adapt around it. I think I would have had, like, a little bit less internal conflict.
The internal conflict is a big one.
And, like, this is one of the things that I love about football, and I think about a lot is, like, how kind of what happens and how you build a team on the field replicates structurally all the way up. And I just think about, like, how many different ways there is to be a great football player and how many ways there is to even play the same position greatly. Like, you think about great quarterbacks, and you could line 5 of them up in a row, and they would all be vastly different as athletes, as people, how they train, how they think about the game. And I just think part of building a team is finding the ways that those athletes complement each other. And then I think about building a staff and building a coaching staff. And the same thing, there's so many different ways to be a great coach. And some great coaches are great analysts. Some great coaches are great teachers. You know, some have on field skills. Some have a different vision. Some are great play callers. But to make a really effective team, you need all of those different parts. And it's just, I guess, trusting that the people who are putting you in different positions see that in you and see that you have something valuable to contribute as yourself. And I just remember, you know, my 3rd year was my first season with Coach Killam, and, he was coming from a team where the guy who is the video coordinator in Calgary, Ross Bolin, he's been there for ages. Like, I think his first season with the Stamps, he told me he was 16, right? And so it's been, like, 30 plus years, and meanwhile, I'm in my 2nd season. I've kind of learned to do the job for this, like, one specific group of people and what their needs are, but, like, broadly, you know, I'm still pretty new to it. And I just remember sending out an email to the staff or like having a meeting with everybody and kind of starting it with, hey, you know, we're all growing together. I'm going to try and solve your problems, but have some patience. And I think he said it nicer than this, but this is kind of how it stuck in my head. I just remember Killam kind of taking me aside after and being like, you need to deliver that with more confidence, whether or not it's true. And I always kind of operate from a place where humility is gonna benefit me. But I think sometimes what I think is humility comes off as insecurity. And he was like, just be a little bit more confident in the way you speak about yourself so that other people have confidence in you. And I've kind of tried to carry that along with me, and it helped me a lot.
That's a really good one. I think as women, generally, not everyone, but generally across the board, we're tending to operate from this space of insecurity. And especially when you get into these male spaces where you, even going into it feeling at like the top of your game somewhere else, you go in and you feel like you're all the way back at the bottom. Also, because your opportunities are much more limited, you just don't have that base knowledge. So you're just scrambling to just take in as much as you can and get to where everyone else is when you're already realistically, you're 10 steps behind walking into it. And I think it's kind of like you said, it's reminding yourself that also like no one is expecting you to know everything.
Mm.
But if you pretend that like I know everything and you never ask any questions, then it's like when you don't know something, people are like, I thought you knew everything.
And that's like that's the thing too, is I'm always you also see a lot of people in various roles who like love to talk about how much they know, and then when it comes down to it, don't have a lot of substance, and I'm always, like, really scared of being that person, and I think there's a balance to be struck in there.
I want to talk a little bit about the CFL women's and football program because it's obviously a big part of your journey. You have been one of the women who were able to turn a short term development opportunity into a full time role. You talked a little bit about how that went down, but what do you think had to align for that next door to open? And how much of it do you feel like was in your control?
It was just this, like, perfect storm of things falling into place. Is, like, certainly I would not have been in the room without that women in football program, and then it was I'll take some credit here, it was my mindset in that camp that kind of let me stay there. And our old special teams coordinator, Mike Shepard, referred to it as being a cockroach. Okay. And he was like, some of us like didn't get here with the traditional pathways, but you found a way to, like, scurry into the room, and now you just have to, like, not be exterminated. You know what I mean? And it was just, what skills or value can you bring, and can you, like, make yourself useful or enough of a pain in everyone's ass, honestly, to not get swooshed out the door. And so this is another thing where I feel like kind of what happens on the field replicates up top is, for me, it was like a little bit of like the next man up mentality. And you watch it happen with players, and I just felt like I came in and I absorbed what I could and I tried to be as helpful to as many people as possible. I worked with the equipment team and I spent a lot of time down in the training room just seeing what they were up to, made myself as useful as possible in operations. And we all just kind of had this attitude of whatever needs to get done, we'll figure out a way to get it done. So then when other people either faltered or dropped out, it was my turn to get called up. I felt like I had done the work to, like, be ready for it, right? Yeah, I'm just, like, thankful for that program for opening the door. I'm also really thankful during my time in Edmonton, and I know not everyone gets this, and I'm incredibly lucky for this. I've got to work with some really impressive women in Edmonton, and that was really transformative. Obviously, my gender is not the be all end all in the workplace, but I will say it's broy in there, right? It is kinda isolating because it's just guys being bros and, the video department, you're kind of on an island, and you're spending so, so, so many hours in this building with these people that you don't have a lot of time to foster relationships outside of the building, but then again, it can be, like, a little bit isolating inside. So I've been really lucky. Um, Coach Aaron Craig was the strength and conditioning coach my first couple years. Danelle Tucker is their strength coach now. Lisa Swallow down in the training room. It's been really helpful to me to have other women around to, like, learn from and just knock ideas around with and talk to. And when I think about who is working in the league right now, that was probably pretty unique to Edmonton.
What do you think needs to change for us to see more women moving into roles? And I don't want to actually just say roles, I want to say bigger, new, different roles in the CFL.
One thing I will say that disappointed me a little bit about the uptake of that program is there have been a lot less women selected in coaching roles than I was hoping there would be. And I just think about some of the reasons that were given about this. I've had conversations where people say, well, oh, there just aren't qualified applicants, which I can name a bunch right now. That doesn't feel quite right to me. To just having seen the various roles offered to guest coach at training camp, you don't need to have like a PhD football IQ, is you're going to be taking notes, you're going to be helping with equipment for drills, you're going to be repeating what you're hearing next to you. And I kind of don't know like what kind of major qualifications you need to walk in to be able to do that. Um, there's women all across the country coaching high school, coaching youth sports, doing all these things and just kind of waiting for an opportunity to even just like observe it on a bigger stage. And so I just think some open-mindedness from head coaches that experience might not look like you expect it to. And that a lot of the women who play or work in this sport have these like kind of non-traditional pathways, and I think that there's value in the perspectives that come with that too. And then just that willingness to keep elevating people. And part of this is like a two-way street. I again think about things that I would do differently, but also just the parts that don't come naturally to me is the networking piece. I find like really tough. And I think about the men who coach in this sport and how close communication they keep with one another, and how it is just you're keeping these networks alive and you're talking to each other and you're kind of hustling every off season and trying to find places where you fit. But then it's that same thing, it's the sponsorship. I heard about something here that I have a connection to. I know this guy would be a good fit. let me call and link them up. And I think sometimes we don't do as good of a job of that on the women's side. Sometimes I think we don't always have those relationships or those connections with male coaches who are willing to vouch for us, but I also don't think we do it for each other as much as we need to be. And I think that's something that and part of it, gonna get on my soapbox again here for a second. Part of it, I think there's this like scarcity mentality where it's like there can be like a woman on the staff. But again, let's not draw attention to that fact, but also like careful about having to. And sometimes I think we buy into those myths where it's like you think that you made it in the man's world or whatever because you're getting fed this line that like something about you is like exceptional or different, or you're not like other women, you work hard and can take a joke or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just like every other woman I know. So many women that I know would thrive in these spaces and just kind of haven't been offered the opportunity to. So I think I think we need to lift each other up a little bit more when we get the chance. And then for me, you've talked about it a little bit actually, is like lots of it I think isn't necessarily gendered. I just think it's like a small league that can sometimes be really resistant to change in general. And it's been really exciting to be with Edmonton last year because I see a lot of youth in the coaching staff on that team and a lot of like mentorship happening and a lot of guys getting more opportunity week to week to make an impact and different ideas and ideas from different people being treated seriously. And that's really exciting and hopeful to me.
Having worked in an organization where you were actually very lucky to work around multiple other women, we have the CFL Women in Football program. Every club does it because it's mandated by the league. What does it how does it look, feel, seem in an organization that's buying into that program and investing in that program because they believe that it's valuable versus an organization who is doing it because they're told they have to?
Lucky for me, I can only speak to the first half of that question, is, um, it just felt like it wasn't ever really a consideration, and I wonder part of it is, like, there's not really actually any impetus for organizations to hire women, and, like, in a lot of ways in these spaces, there's still this kind of, like, sacred, like, bro-y locker room culture, and maybe some stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you wouldn't be comfortable with, like, somebody coming in and seeing. I think it's unfortunate to say this is kind of like a wild thing to say, but it's like for teams hire women on the football operations side and on the coaching side. I'm not gonna say it's a risk, but there are teams that would view it as like a distraction, which is unfortunate. But for me, the day I got in there, that was not really ever a consideration. I always knew that I would be supported by the staff if there ever was a problem where people were treating me differently or were, like, worse because of my gender. If anything, actually, this is kind of a funny story. There's just a lot of people in this industry still who just simply have not worked closely with women before. It's a job that you could legitimately do from, like, start to finish and never cross paths with women at work, which is baffling. There's probably not a lot of career paths where that's true anymore, but this is one of them, and so I think sometimes there's an over caution almost, where in my first season, I remember and then, like, last year with the new staff, I've had to, like, have a couple conversations with coaches where I'm like, "Hey, like, I actually think you're not comfortable delivering feedback to me the way you would my male counterparts, and I appreciate that you're not trying to yell at me or whatever, I guess, but also I can take the feedback and I'm, like, here because I want to do the job and I wanna do it well." And I just remember my first game after I signed my full season contract, my first season. So first regular season game, I was in the booth clipping the Sky Coaches, like our video replay system that goes to the iPads, right? And everyone kind of warned me, "Okay, you're in the booth with the coaches. It might get kinda heated in there, like, people are gonna be fired up, you might hear some stuff, like, don't freak out, don't take anything personally, just, like, do your job, whatever. And so I'm in there and I'm hearing what the coaches are saying, and it's getting, like, a little heated, but I would say they're keeping it, like, very PG. It was, like, everyone was pretty subdued, and then I think I either, like, started or stopped a play too late or early, or maybe I, like, missed one or something, and I knew I had done it, and I could hear the coaches at the front of the room mention that there was a play missing. And, like, I still even to this day, I'm like, I don't know, I guess it depends on the play really, like, how big of a deal that is. Maybe it actually wasn't that important. Maybe they were being easy on me because I was new. Maybe they were being easy on me because they didn't have a lot of comfort working with women. But I left that game and I'm in the office after, and it's the next morning, and as I was sharing an office with Franz Clarkson, who's the manager of football ops, and he's been, like, such a great resource to me too. I kind of asked him all of my, like, mystifying questions, especially that first year about, "Is this me?" or, like, "Is this how it works?" And he was like, "Well, how did it go?" And I was like, "Franz, I just kind of feel like everyone was being really polite in there." And, like, I don't know if that's, like, how it is, and I was just expecting something outrageous, or, like, if everyone feels a little bit uncomfortable around me, but, like, I don't want people to be changing their behavior and it, like, messing up their juju or their, like, process or whatever. And then our offensive coordinator comes into the office and he goes, "Franz, can we have the room?" And we kind of gave each other a look and it was like, "Oh boy, like, this is it. I'm about to get chewed out." And Franz leaves the room and he closes the door and he sits down and he goes, "I just wanna talk to you about what happened in the booth yesterday." And I went, "Oh my god, oh no." And he just went, "I'm really sorry for, like, the way we speak in there. It gets hot in there, it's game day, you know, we need to be better about the way we're talking and the way we handle our emotions." And I was like, "Coach, we were having 2 really different experiences in there. We were okay, like, I'm not that sensitive. You're good, please carry on." And it was just this, like, funny moment where I think other people probably think about it a lot more than I do. I just think about even in the past, like, 3 years, all of the athletes who have come through that program who maybe, again, hadn't seen women working in that space before, who now just think it's normal to have a female strength coach and, like, will just operate in the world as if that's normal, and I don't think it's always the big things. I think it's just the little moments of normalization and comfort for people that really transform it.
It's a really great example. The feeling of not wanting to feel like you're forcing people to act differently. And that story is the prime example where your view of it is you're waiting for the bomb to drop. You're like, this is going to get crazy. And then it doesn't. So you're questioning, well, like what, like everyone made it seem this way and like it's not. And actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, that was very much my experience just going into the CFL in the beginning. People are like, it's gonna be long hours, it's gonna be so hard, it's gonna be this absolute grind, it's gonna be so challenging, like you're gonna deal with so much. And it's not to say that it was easy, but like the way people talked it up was very different than what my actual experience was.
And the other thing I will say, actually, I just gotta throw this one in there. The Edmonton Elks right now is run by a whole bunch of girl dads, and, like, it shows, and it's just a bunch of men with daughters, and they're bringing their daughters to the office, um, and, like, I watched Killam talk to his daughters about what he does, and Aaron Grimes bringing his girls into the office all the time, and we're at a staff outing one day, and all of the coaches are huddled around Jason Tucker's iPhone because his daughter is competing in track finals, and everyone is just, like, losing their minds, and that, I think, has an impact too, right? I just really appreciate the energy. All of the staffs that I've been a part of in 3 years, it's been so different. But another one for me was when I first took on Oh, no, it was the same game. It was my first game of the regular season in 2023, and I came into the office to help, like, set up the video, and I was the only one in the office except for Chris Jones, and Chris Jones has a hell of a reputation, but I will say that I will never speak anything but highly of him because I don't think I would have been given the opportunities that I was given by a different person in a different situation, and whether people think that's a good thing or bad thing, I obviously kinda ran with it, but I just remember coming into the office, and he knew that I had coaching aspirations. That season, I was like again, quickly learned that, like, there really is no time for this, but I was trying to be involved with a high school too. I was coaching a little bit at Satchis when I had the time, and Chris Jones, like, came to one of our games one time at Foot, and that was, like, really meaningful, but I remember coming in that first day and just seeing him in the hallway and being like, "Hey, coach, like, I really appreciate you kind of giving me an opportunity to stick around for the season." And he just started naming names of coaches and GMs in the CFL and NFL and in all these various places that had started in the video department, and it's meant a lot to me to be kind of seen for the work I do and the potential I have outside of my gender, I guess.
I really appreciate that story because I know anyone who's listened to a lot of what I have to say about people in the CFL knows that I don't often nice things to say about Chris Jones as a whole, based on my experience and my knowledge and all of that. But I think I'm also more than willing to look at, every person has two sides and like we see one
Totally.
person, but we don't necessarily see the person behind the scenes. And people are responsible, I think, for both visions because you contribute to both of them. But it does make me happy. And I think it also gives me a lot of hope that even sometimes the people we may see them a certain way or have a certain opinion of them, but it doesn't mean that it's all bad and there is still good coming out of it because, like, I can look at it and be like, yeah, you know what? I'm grateful that Chris Jones is in the league because it ended up with you having the opportunity that you have.
And that's the one thing you see all sides of people, I feel like, in this industry. And it's again, I think it's just like spending so many hours together is like you really get the good with the bad and vice versa.
So we've talked a lot about where you've been in football and obviously stepping away from the Elks this year, taking the time to focus more on being an athlete and have a little bit more autonomy over your life. When you're looking ahead, what does the next chapter of your relationship with the game look like? What are you hoping to build, pursue, or experience next?
Okay, this is such a great question, and it's one that I don't have a super solid answer for. Right now, I am pleased to declare myself a free agent. I'm kind of just waiting for the next opportunity to hit me. I really would like, and this again, part of my downfall is that the networking is like such a part that does not come naturally to me. Is like everyone's like, you need to be making all these calls, you need to be reaching out to people. And I'm like, oh, it's so hard to pitch yourself to strangers. It's so tough. But I would really like to step into the coaching side. I love coaching the girls. Again, the experience I've had with a couple high schools on and off for the past few years, I've really loved. And I just think the experience I have in the video department and in the ops department would make me useful on a youth sports staff. I've thought about I wish I do and I don't. I wish the landscape for college football in Canada was a little bit more parallel to what goes on in the States. Ideally, I would love to like be a GA, but such a role doesn't quite exist in Canada. Or like definitely not one where you can either like go to school or feed yourself on. Not something I'm really worried about. I'm like, again, there's always hospitality to fall back on while I hustle at the other stuff. But I kind of knew when I left the Elks that I was, like, taking some personal time and time to, like you said, get my own life together, be an athlete, and I knew one of the trade-offs might be that I didn't have anywhere to land this football season, and I've been kind of trying to, like, choke down the dread that if you take a year off, you get left behind. And in a lot of ways, like, I think it could be true, but I think the time to kind of reflect and do some training and hone my skills and just interact with people and just taking the time to I think you talked about this in your first couple episodes, is like there's this impulse at the beginning to say yes to every opportunity that comes and feel like if you don't say yes to them, they're kind of gonna, like, get away from you. And I'm trying to learn patience. And when I think about and when I talk to you about the journey that's come, the most impactful steps have not been the ones that I was chasing or expecting. They've sort of just found their way to me through my connection with you and with other people. So I'm biding my time right now and hoping the right thing comes along, but you'll see me coaching somewhere in the future.
There's so many parallels with some of the comments you made in that conversation that align with when me and Nadia both stepped back the same year and had a conversation of, "Are you going back? Are you going back? What are you doing?" And one of the things that we did talk about was that because of our backgrounds, coming from more than just football, we have this ability to step into another role, to step into another job and take care of ourselves and feed ourselves and have a roof over our heads because we have come from a different background versus males typically go from being a player to a coach and they don't ever have that opportunity to build up that other skill set or don't have an education to fall back on. So they don't have that option to take a breath versus we have almost this innate privilege.
That's a great way to think of that. I've never even considered it that way. But yeah, instead of kind of being like, "Oh, I'm, like, missing the train," yeah, I wasn't really scared about taking that step away about, like, what I would do because I feel like I have enough, like, diversity of experience and education that something would happen, and I'm hopeful actually, I've been reflecting a lot on our time at Free Play, and, I've learned so much, um from my time in professional sports, and I would say, like, just built so much capacity and, like, confidence in kind of my own ability to, like, learn things. But I'm really hoping that somehow something will find me or maybe create something, I don't know, that kind of bridges my love of, like, sport as competition and sport in its power to, like, do good and, like, change people's lives and make people into better people.
I think that's really the power of sport is being able to bridge those things. And I think the more that that happens and the more that there's people like you trying to make that happen, especially in Canada, a country where realistically sport struggles if you're not hockey.
Mhm.
And how can we get more and gain more, I think is by figuring out how we can give more in the first place.
I love that.
I'm really excited to see what's next for your journey. I like this little space of like, take a breath, see what's next, and really getting to choose what you want to do, not just because another opportunity has popped up. It's, what do I want to welcome into my life? What do I want to step into? And see where it goes from there. So,
Mhm.
we're going to shift gears a little bit and we're going to run through some fast fire questions before we finish with one final thought.
Oh, this was my biggest fear because I'm so bad at 1 sentence
Offense, defense, or special teams.
often, but I will tell you, they used to make me play DB, on the Storm, and, like, I was getting destroyed. I am a liability in coverage. I have no business being out there. I was so bad, and I have recently shifted to D-line, and it has dramatically changed my outlook on defense. I love it so much, but offense still has my heart.
So you were Ryan Gosling in
Oh
was it
god,
Remember the
we're
Titans?
yes,
Liability at corner? Yeah.
yes.
Winning ugly or losing while playing your best?
Winning ugly.
What is your most toxic football trait?
I think I've recently, like, really come into this. I'm a shit talker, and I talk more shit than I can like, you're a shit talker, but you can kinda back it up. I talk more shit than I can back up. I'll say it.
One role in football you still haven't tried but would like to?
I know I would be terrible at it, but I would, like, take a couple reps as a returner. It would be scary.
During your time with the Elks, who brought the most energy into the building every day?
Mark Hillem, so full of juice. When people say they would, like, run through a wall for that guy, I feel it.
Who was the first person with the Elks who made you feel like you truly belonged?
Franz Clarkson.
Which CFL player would be the best video coordinator?
Honestly, Justin Rankin would be really good at it.
What was the funniest request a player ever made of you?
I made a highlight tape for McLeod Bethel Thompson, and just, like, his music choices for his highlight tape were, like, really unhinged. Not your typical, like, hype music. He was like, "I want my highlights to Fleetwood Mac," and it's, like, one of the proudest things I've ever created.
One thing CFL players obsess over that fans would never expect.
Like, body image issues that, like, I wouldn't have expected, and even, like, retired athletes. And I like, it makes sense, of course, like, you're in a job where you're being scrutinized for, like, what your body looks like and what it does all the time, like, sure, that has an effect. Like, it has more of an effect than I expected.
What was the most stressful moment of a game week?
This is, like, maybe silly, but, like, internally, the most stressful was always when we got on the plane. Is, like, in a lot of ways, it's the least stressful because you can turn off your phone for a couple hours and you're, like, not reachable. But as soon as we got on the plane, I could have packed and repacked 100 times, but I was, like, immediately, like, freaking out that I had forgot something. But instead, I always packed, like, quadruple of everything that I had in the whole office.
What is one Elks memory you know you'll still be telling 10 years from now?
Jones came into my office the one day and was like, "Hey, I need you to book the pool. We're gonna go use the pool." And I had to, like, be the poor schmuck who goes up to the poor people working the reception desk at Commonwealth and be like, "Hey, we're bringing 80 of the biggest people you've ever seen to public swim." Just all of these, like, gigantic children. I think, like, the whole O-line tried to climb the, like, tiny rock climbing wall and accidentally brought it down.
Who's going to win the Grey Cup this year?
Edmonton Elks. The day I handed in my resignation, one of the things I said to Mark Killam, I'm like, "Listen, I know that I'm making a choice here because this is probably my year to get a ring, and just know that when you guys make it to the Grey Cup, like, somebody behind your bench is gonna be screaming their head off, and it's me."
What was your first reaction when you found out we'd be teammates again?
It's the same as the reaction I'm having right now, it's just, like, full body screaming. And honestly, that was, like, there have been little moments that have affirmed my choice, is, like, I miss the team, I miss the CFL every game day, I regret it a little bit, but then I just, like, think about how lucky I am to get to take the field with you and to get to spend my summer around, like, so many impressive women, and I just it's been like, we haven't played a full season together since 2019, and I'm so juiced about it.
What are you the most excited about heading into the national tournament?
It's honestly just to get to July and still have football to look forward to. Is, like, even when we get to play a full season, it's the seasons in the women's league are so short, and it was just, like, finishing our championship game and being like, "Man, I still have a whole week to play." And Erin Craig is on Team Maritimes, and we also have not been reunited for a minute, so very excited to see her.
With this tournament happening for the first time in 10 years, what would make the tournament feel successful beyond winning a medal?
A commitment to keeping it going on a regular schedule.
What is the biggest lie football tells people about success?
That you have to leave everything else at the door. I think some of the best athletes and best coaches and best people involved in the sport carry their whole selves with them.
Which version of football Shaylee taught you the most about yourself?
I will say probably, I guess, my experience with the Elks has taught me this most dramatically, but this is what I love about being an athlete too. It just teaches you to, like, imagine beyond what you thought your capacity was. And with the Elks, I got called up to fulfill a role that I didn't necessarily feel prepared for, and I got to surprise myself with what I had in me. And now kind of when I take the field as an athlete, I remember that you can do difficult things.
What is the hardest question you are currently asking yourself?
Who are you when nobody's looking?
One word for the chapter you just closed.
Gratitude,
One word for the chapter you're entering.
open-mindedness.
So that was the fast fire version of your football journey. But before we finish, I want to leave people with something practical, especially the women listening who know they want to be a part of this game, but may not know yet where they fit. If a young woman in Canada wants to work in football, but doesn't know whether she belongs in coaching, operations, video, or media, what is the first step you would tell her to take?
This is kinda wild advice coming from me when I just said that I'm, like, so bad at it, but just, like, reach out and ask people questions. My new maybe practice in the world is, like, trying to be less sensitive to rejection, and I think the only way of doing it is by practicing it. So I just think, like, I'm gonna give myself the same advice. Just have the audacity to ask the question. Like, that's the one thing is maybe I wasn't asking, like, the hard-hitting ones, but I was asking everybody in that building what they were doing all of the time, and usually, people had the, like, patience to, um, kind of explain themselves. Like, whether it's coaching, you have questions about coverage, whether it's I asked Ed a lot of questions about his process during the combines, um, and just, like, gained a lot of perspective, like, people love to share.
Shaylee, I think your journey is proof that there isn't only one way to belong in football and that being curious enough to explore every part of the game can become a strength, even when the path isn't straightforward. Thank you for willing to talk honestly about the opportunities, the difficult parts, and why you continue to choose football. I'm so grateful for the chapters we've already shared, and I'm excited that the next one will have us back on the field together with Team Alberta. Thank you for joining me on Blitz and Bloom.
Oh my god, thank you for having me. I will tell you that I came in prepared for some hot takes about last week and the upcoming CFL weeks that I was, like, ready to get canceled for, but maybe we'll save those conversations for private.
You know what? Let's throw in one hot take right at the end because, not everyone makes it to the end of the podcast, so only some people will hear it.
Okay, here's my personal one. I've been thinking a lot about football and emotions, okay? And I've been thinking a lot about the matchup last week between Ottawa and Edmonton. And just I think we all know how you feel about the head coach of Ottawa. I don't have any we've never met. I don't really have any personal dog in this fight, but I see the same things that you see. You know, I imagine that I would feel the same way if I met Ryan Dinwiddie. I just think about when you hear people who think, like, women shouldn't coach or, like, be in any various jobs or whatever, the thing that gets brought up a lot is emotionality. "Oh, you're, like, too emotional, you're too, like, vindictive," whatever else, and I just think about all these qualities, and then I think there's some coaches who I think use their emotions in really effective ways. And even coaches who have outbursts sometimes or yell or lecture or whatever else, things that I don't necessarily align with, you can see when coaches are using them strategically. And I think you can see when coaches are controlled by their emotions. And I think Edmonton and Ottawa were a great matchup because I think those are two coaches who I will say, working with Mark Killam, he's an emotional guy. He wears his feelings on his face. They come out, in various ways. I've seen him blow up on people before. I've also seen him stand in front of the room the day after a game and say, "Hey, guys, before we start this meeting, I need to address something. I made a mistake." I see him owning his emotions. I see him working on how they do or do not benefit him or others in a game. And then you see other coaches who like to have outbursts and then throw anyone else under the bus. And I just think I've just been imagining this week about like what that affect would look like if, say, you were a head coach and you were operating in that way. And I just think it would be received very differently than it is by some of the men who do this job, and that's my hot take.
because they're passionate, passionate and very competitive and committed. That's why it's acceptable, because passion.
And my last little dig, I can't wait. I hope Drew Brown gets some time this week against his former team.
I'm here for that. That is all I wanna talk about going into this week. It is the only matchup I care about. That and seeing if the BC Lions can repeat their defensive performance or if that was just a one-off for the season.
I'm excited for that one too.
That was Shaylee Ford, a reminder that there is more than one way to belong in football and that access means very little without real opportunity to grow. Follow, like, and subscribe to Blitz and Bloom and share this episode with someone who is still trying to find their place in the game.